My mom joked about taking a loan in my name, saying I was finally useful. Minutes passed. I thought she was kidding until the debt collectors knocked. She said you'd pay us, they whispered. We lived in a small duplex in Schenectady, New York, where the paint peeled from the siding and the radiators hissed like angry cats in winter. Clarice worked odd jobs, cleaning houses, part-time cashier gigs, but never for long. She always had an excuse: they were jealous of me, or the manager was a pervert. Eventually, she just stopped trying. By the time I hit middle school, she'd fully leaned into government assistance, claiming she was too sensitive for the workforce. That was her phrase, not mine. Growing up under her roof felt like walking through a minefield. You didn't know if she'd wake up cheerful or cruel. One day, she'd offer you hot cocoa and watch movies with you. The next, she'd throw a plate because you forgot to take out the trash. She never laid a hand on me, but her words could leave welts. By high school, I was obsessed with escaping. I got good grades, stayed invisible, took up a part-time job at a bookstore after school and saved every penny. SUNY Albany was my ticket out. It wasn't far geographically, but emotionally, it was another world. When I moved into my first apartment in Albany, I felt like I could breathe for the first time. Clarice didn't visit. She didn't ask how school was. She only called when she needed something, usually cash. I fell into the trap more than once. Sent her money for rent that probably went to liquor and scratch-offs. She was good at guilt. After college, I started working in IT for a firm up in Saratoga Springs. I'd built a decent life. It wasn't flashy, but it was stable. I had health insurance, a retirement account, even a credit score in the high 700s. And I kept my distance from Clarice. She hated that. She'd occasionally call and leave voicemails laced with sarcasm and martyrdom. Don't worry about your poor old mother. I'll figure it out, or I was just wondering if my only son still remembered I exist. I'd delete them. Then one day last summer, she called and I picked up. I don't know why. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I just wanted to believe she'd changed. That's when she made the joke. She said she'd taken out a loan in my name, $50,000. Finally, all those years of me raising you are paying off. I was stunned. I asked if she was serious. She laughed and said, "Oh, calm down. Can't I joke with my son anymore?" Weird, right? But this is Clarice. That kind of passive-aggressive humor was her weapon of choice. I figured maybe she was jealous that I had good credit, or maybe she was trying to get a rise out of me. I tried to shake it off. 3 weeks later, 2 men knocked on my apartment door. They looked like they walked off the set of a crime drama, dark suits, leather folders, stern expressions. "Mr. Barker?" the taller one asked. "Yeah? We're here on behalf of Orchard Financial Recovery regarding your outstanding loan balance." They handed me a thick folder. Loan documents. My name. My social security number. A forged signature. Disbursement records showing the funds deposited into an account at Capital Trust Bank. An account with my mother's address attached. "She said you'd take care of it," the shorter one said with an eerie calm. She said it was family business. I think I went numb after that. I called Clarice. She didn't deny it. She didn't even apologize. She spun it like a favor I owed her. "I needed it," she said. "I figured you could handle it. You've got your fancy job and your little apartment. You wouldn't even miss it." My voice cracked. "That's fraud, Mom. You gonna call the cops on your own mother?" She laughed again. It wasn't funny. It was terrifying. I hung up. Then I sat at the edge of my bed and stared at the wall for hours. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just broke. That week, I froze my credit, filed a police report, and contacted an attorney. The whole process took months. I submitted handwriting samples, logged evidence, and gathered statements. I learned more about identity theft than I ever wanted to. The bank eventually reversed the charges, but not before sending my credit into a nosedive. Clarice made it worse at every step. She lied to the police. She said I gave her permission. She showed up at court in a tattered coat and cried like she was the victim. The judge wasn't moved. The evidence was clear. She was 18 months old. Only served 9 with good behavior. That was almost a year ago. She was released last fall. I found out from my aunt, who still lives in Schenectady. She said Clarice moved in with some guy she met at a gas station who promised to help her get back on her feet. I haven't heard from her since. I've moved twice. Changed my number. Still check my credit monthly, just in case. I never thought I'd go no contact with my own mother, but I did. And I don't regret it. But part of me still feels that gnawing guilt. She carried me in her body for 9 months. Fed me. Took me to school when I was a kid. She wasn't all bad. She just changed. Or maybe she never changed at all, and I only recently started seeing her clearly. Friends have asked if I'll ever forgive her. I don't know. Maybe someday. But forgiveness doesn't mean re-entry into my life. It doesn't mean I put my trust in her hands again. I've spent the last few months rebuilding, not just my credit, but my boundaries. My sense of self. My ability to believe that just because someone is family doesn't mean they get to treat you like a resource. And yet, every now and then, I hear her voice in my head. That same sarcastic laugh. That same "you're finally useful" line. It doesn't hurt anymore. Not like it used to. But it echoes. Some days I still wake up expecting to see an envelope on my doorstep with my name spelled wrong. That's how Clarice used to do it when she wanted to guilt-trip me into giving her money. Big bubble letters, often with little hearts drawn into the loops of the AS, like it was a love note, not a passive-aggressive demand for cash. Trauma, I've learned, doesn't leave like a dramatic exit, it lingers like fog in corners you didn't know existed. After she got out of jail, I waited for the inevitable. A call. A letter. And I've changed monologue. But nothing came. Not a whisper. Not even a petty voicemail. That silence was both a relief and a trap. I started seeing a therapist around the time I moved to Rochester. Her name's Dr. Savalas, no relation to the actor, she joked during our first session. She's the first person who really helped me unpack what it means to grow up as the emotional support animal for a narcissist. I spent most of my life trying to guess what mood my mother was in so I could survive it. That habit doesn't die just because the person's out of your life. I'd catch myself replaying old phone calls, imagining different answers. I'd think about that first conversation with the debt collectors and wonder what would have happened if I had slammed the door, or denied everything, or even lied. But that's not me. I've spent my whole life being responsible. Honest. Careful. That's why it cut so deep when she exploited that. I remember a conversation I had with my coworker, Jared, not long after everything happened. We were standing by the coffee machine, and he mentioned helping his parents out with their mortgage. He smiled, said it felt good to give back. I forced a laugh and said, "Yeah, it's nice when your family's got your back." I didn't mean it. I just didn't want to explain why mine never had mine. People like Jared come from families that celebrate birthdays, send Christmas cards, and show up at graduations. I envy people like that. They get to think of their parents with affection. Nostalgia. Not suspicion. One time, when I was 16, I got a summer job at a grocery store. First paycheck ever. I was so proud. Clarice took one look at the check and said, "Ooh, I could use that for cigarettes and tampons." I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She cashed it without asking. Said I owed her for everything she's done. I didn't argue. I didn't tell anyone. I just worked more shifts, kept my head down, and learned my lesson. That's the kind of memory that stays. Not because it's traumatic in a movie scene kind of way, but because it teaches you your place in someone else's world. I wasn't a son to Clarice. I was a tool. A vessel. A means to an end. After the identity theft, when I spoke to my lawyer, she asked me point blank, "Do you want to pursue charges?" I hesitated. Not because I didn't think Clarice deserved consequences, but because I didn't want to be that person. The one who sends their own mother to jail. Then I remembered her voice, laughing while admitting she'd stolen my identity. Like she was proud of it. Like it was funny. So I nodded and said yes. Court was a blur. Clarice tried everything to spin the narrative. She wore a torn cardigan like she'd come straight from a shelter. Told the judge I'd given her permission. Said I was an ungrateful child trying to ruin the only person who ever cared about me. But the evidence was airtight. My name is forged on 10 different pages. The IP address traced to her house. Surveillance from the bank. She never stood a chance. After her sentencing, I sat in the courtroom long after she was taken away. I didn't feel triumphant. Just exhausted. Like I'd finally dropped a weight I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. The months that followed were quiet. I kept my routine. Work, home, therapy, the occasional hike or dinner with friends. But I started noticing things, little freedoms I hadn't appreciated before. Like not checking my phone every few hours out of dread. Or not flinching when a private number is called. That's when I realized how much space Clarice took up in my life, even in absence. I started saying no more often. No to overworking. No to toxic friends. No to obligations that felt more like burdens. It was hard at first. Saying no felt selfish. I had to rewire that guilt response, something that had been installed in me since childhood. And I started saying yes, too. Yes to things I'd been afraid to want. I took a solo trip to Maine. I started dating again, carefully, honestly. I even signed up for a cooking class, something Clarice always mocked me for wanting to do. "What are you, a housewife?" she once said, laughing at my excitement over a pasta-making kit I'd ordered in college. In the class, I met people who didn't flinch when I said I was estranged from my mother. One woman, Teresa, told me she hadn't spoken to her father in over a decade. "Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do," she said, "is not pick up the phone." Still, there are days I wonder. What if she's sick? What if she ends up on the street? What if one day, years from now, I get a call from a hospital or a coroner? Winter hit Rochester hard that year. The kind that turns your breath into clouds and your thoughts into ice. I remember walking to my car one morning and pausing, just for a second, wondering if Clarice had enough blankets wherever she was. That thought made me angry. Not at her. At myself. Why was I still thinking about her comfort when she'd sold mine off for 50 grand and a bottle of gin? That's the thing they don't tell you about cutting someone off. You don't stop caring right away. You just stop acting on it. And some days, even that feels impossible. My therapist had a phrase for it: residual loyalty. The idea that some of us, especially those raised in dysfunctional families, grow up thinking our love is a contract. That we owe it. That being a good son means unconditional support, no matter the cost. Even if it costs your peace, your savings, your sense of self. One night, I got a letter. Not from her, at least, not directly. It was from an organization in Schenectady. A women's housing outreach center. They were reaching out to next of kin for someone who had listed me as their emergency contact. Clarice. She wasn't in danger. She wasn't dying. She wasn't even asking to reconnect. She had simply listed me, and now, someone was trying to verify if I was still reachable in case of anything. The letter was formal. Non-invasive. But my hands trembled holding it. I didn't call. I couldn't. Instead, I folded the letter and slid it between two books on my shelf, one she'd never read, one she would have mocked me for buying. That same week, I went through a box of old photos I'd been meaning to organize. Most were from college, a few from work events, and one, just one, of her holding me as a baby. She looked tired. Almost resentful. Like the camera had caught her in a moment she hadn't agreed to. I looked like any other baby, confused, helpless, squirming. I stared at that photo for a long time, trying to remember something, anything, from that age. But memories don't really start that early. So all I had was her expression. That slightly curled lip, that distracted gaze. Was she already planning then? Was I always a transaction? Or was she just broken? I know people talk about narcissism, mental illness, generational trauma, but none of those words comfort you when the person who should have protected you becomes the person you need protection from. I've learned that family isn't sacred just because it's blood. Some families are built on respect. Others are afraid. Some offer love. Others demand loyalty. Clarissa's love always came with strings. I remember my 24th birthday. I didn't throw a party, I didn't want to make a big deal. Just dinner with a couple coworkers. She called that night and said, "Oh, so you forgot about me, huh?" I told her no, I'd just been busy. She scoffed, "I gave birth to you. I gave you life. And you give your friends your birthday?" I didn't respond. She hung up. The next morning, she sent me a photo of a baby in a hospital blanket, not me, just a stock photo, and wrote, "Remember where you came from." It was manipulative, sure. But part of me stared at that image longer than I should have. Not out of guilt. But because I wanted so badly to feel something about that connection again. Something good. Something real. But it wasn't there. I had to stop chasing it. Recently, I got promoted at work. A quiet success. I didn't tell many people, just a few close friends. After the meeting where they handed me the new title, I went back to my desk, closed the door, and stared at my reflection on the screen. No one had clapped. No one had taken a picture. But it felt big. Like something my younger self had hoped for all along. For a second, I imagined telling her. I imagined her saying, "Well, finally, you're starting to make something of yourself." Not congratulations. Not pride. Just that slow, sarcastic dig. The one she'd always reach for when she was losing control. And I knew right then, I didn't need her to know. She didn't need to be part of this chapter. Or the next. I started journaling again. Not every day. Just on the days where the silence gets heavy. When my mind drifts back to the old house in Schenectady, to her laugh, to that thick envelope of forged documents that changed everything. Some entries are long. Others ramble into stories I didn't know were still in me. Like the time I got a perfect score on my 5th grade math test and she accused me of cheating. Or the time I brought home a rescue kitten and she lost it 2 days later. Or how, when I finally moved out, she didn't say goodbye. Just stood in the kitchen smoking, muttering about how some people just think they're better than everyone. I'm not better. I'm just healing. I don't know what the future holds for Clarice. I've stopped Googling her name. Stopped asking my aunt for updates. Stopped rehearsing what I'd say if she ever showed up on my doorstep. But I haven't stopped feeling. That's the hardest part. You can walk away from the house. Change the locks. Cut the cords. But the feelings? They follow. Some of them become smaller, manageable. Others, you just carry. A few weeks ago, I had a dream about her. We were back in our old kitchen, the one with the chipped green linoleum floor and the cabinet that never closed right. Clarice was making instant coffee the way she always did, 2 scoops of whatever cheap brand was on sale and just enough milk to turn it gray. She was humming a song I hadn't heard since I was a kid, some old Linda Ronstadt track she used to play when she cleaned. In the dream, she turned to me and said, "Are you still mad about that loan thing?" And I remember feeling all the heat in my chest rise like steam. But instead of yelling, I just looked at her and said, "You broke something in me." She shrugged and went back to stirring her coffee. "You'll get over it," she said. That's when I woke up. The sun was bleeding through my curtains and I lay there, just staring at the ceiling. Heart racing. Palms sweating. I hadn't thought about that kitchen in years. That floor. That coffee cup with the chip in the rim. Somehow, my mind still holds on to those details, even as I try to let her go. Later that day, I told Dr. Savalas about the dream. She asked what I thought it meant. I said I didn't know. Maybe it's guilt. Maybe it's unresolved grief. Maybe it's just my brain reminding me that you can't rewrite your origin story. You can only move forward. But moving forward is harder than people admit. It's not a straight line. It's moments like when I was filling out paperwork for a passport renewal last month and got to the section asking for my mother's full name. I stared at the blank for a long time. I typed it out. Then deleted it. Then typed it again. It's moments like when my coworker mentions how she's taking her mom to Vermont for the weekend and I smile and say, "Sounds fun," even though inside I feel like someone just slammed a door I wasn't even trying to open. It's moments like seeing a woman who kind of looks like her at the grocery store and feeling my stomach drop, like the past just walked into the produce section wearing a puffer jacket and too much lipstick. I've learned to sit with those moments. Not fight them. Not shove them down. But I still wonder if it'll always be this way. People often ask what healing looks like, and the truth is, it looks like this. Like not flinching when a blocked number calls. Like opening your mail without bracing for disaster. Like finally buying a new couch without calculating how much you'd lose if she ever found a way to get into your apartment. I haven't dated seriously in a while. It's hard to build something new when the foundation you grew up on was made of sand and spite. But I'm trying. I've been talking to someone recently. Her name's Margot. We met through mutual friends at a board game night of all things. She's smart. Thoughtful. The kind of person who listens with her whole body. We've gone on a few dates. Nothing serious yet. But she asks real questions. She notices when I get quiet. She asked once if I was close with my family. I paused. Then told her, "It's complicated." She didn't press. Just nodded and said, "That's okay." I nearly cried in the car on the way home. Not because of what she said, but because she didn't try to fix it. She didn't say family is everything or, "But she's still your mom." She just saw it and let it be. That's rare. Most people don't get it. They've never had to choose between a parent and their own mental health. Never had to explain that love isn't always safe. That biology isn't the same as bond. I used to think if I could just be good enough, just work hard enough, earn enough, behave well enough, maybe Clarice would love me the right way. But love, I've learned, isn't earned. Not that kind. I think she loved me in her own way. But it was buried under fear, bitterness, and a hunger for control. That kind of love is like rust. It eats everything it touches. And I don't want to be eaten anymore. Sometimes, late at night, I still check my email spam folder. Just in case there's a message from her. Sometimes I imagine she's written something. A real apology. A letter where she owns it all. But there's nothing there. Just junk mail and expired coupons. And that, too, is its own kind of peace. The silence from Clarice eventually became normal. Weeks turned into months. I started to accept that the chapter with her might just remain unfinished, unspoken. And I was fine with that. Or at least, I thought I was, until the letter came. It was a cheap, wrinkled envelope with no return address. Postmarked from Schenectady. Inside was a handwritten note. Sloppy cursive, unmistakably hers. "I hear you're making more money now. Funny how things work out. I could use a little help if you're done punishing me. I'm staying at 213 Feller Street. You know where to find me." No apology. No acknowledgement. Just the same old expectation that I'd come running. I almost threw it away. Almost. But something in me paused. It wasn't just the audacity of her asking. It was the fact that she was still the same. Still thought I was a resource. Still thought she had leverage. And I realized. Maybe she did. Maybe deep down, she knew that people like me, people raised to survive in the chaos, don't ever fully lose that guilt. That impulse to fix, to smooth, to rescue. But I was tired of being predictable. I wasn't going to call her. I wasn't going to give her money. I wasn't even going to yell. I was going to win. And I had just the idea. I spent the next few days doing research. A contact at work, someone in security and data forensics, helped me legally dig through some public records, all clean. Clarice had opened a tiny P.O. box and had listed herself under a made-up business name, Silver Lining Consulting. It wasn't a real business, of course. Just a shell to apply for gig work grants and benefits she wasn't actually eligible for. She was gaming the system again. It didn't surprise me. What surprised me was how sloppy she was doing it. The state of New York had been cracking down on fraudulent small business claims ever since the COVID-era loan crap. Clarice had 3 separate EINs listed under variations of her name, all with minimal documentation. It was just enough to file for benefits, but not enough to pass an audit. And she had no idea what I now knew. I didn't go to see her. I didn't even write back. Instead, I wrote a formal, detailed, anonymous report to the New York State Division of Taxation and Finance. Included, copies of the business listings, her EIN filings, a summary of her known addresses and accounts, dates of her incarceration which she failed to report on, all benefit forms, transaction records from when she forged my name, just to establish a pattern. I didn't embellish. I didn't lie. I let the truth speak for itself. 3 weeks later, I received an update in a generic white envelope addressed to the anonymous tipster email I'd used. It thanked me for my report. Said the information provided had prompted a deeper investigation. A few weeks after that, my aunt called. She's in trouble, she said, not sounding surprised. They're saying she owes back taxes. She might lose her housing. I just said, I hope she figures it out. My aunt didn't press. She knew better. It wasn't flashy revenge. There were no fireworks. No movie scene confrontation. No final monologue. But there was justice. She'd taken my name, my credit, my trust, and tried to spin it like I owed her more. So I gave her the one thing she never expected: consequences. And the best part? I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to fight. I just needed to stop shielding her from herself. Since then, I've felt free. Really free. It's funny how the weight you've carried your whole life doesn't feel heavy until it's gone. My credit's perfect again. I paid off my car. I even booked a trip to Nova Scotia this fall, something I've always wanted to do but never gave myself permission for. Margot and I are still seeing each other. It's slow, but it's good. She knows the whole story now. When I told her everything, Clarice, the loan, the court, the letter, she didn't judge me. She just reached across the table, squeezed my hand, and said, "You're allowed to protect your peace." And that's what this whole thing has been, hasn't it? Not revenge out of hatred. Not cruelty for closure. Just the quiet, careful, intentional act of protecting my peace. Clarice isn't in jail. She's not homeless. She's just dealing with her mess. The same way I had to deal with mine when she left it on my doorstep. And now, finally, it's her name that's the problem. Not mine. And that's enough for me. That's more than enough.